Right, evening, guys. This is the second attempt at recording this. Right, so a couple of questions have come through. One of them on the forum. I've had a couple of questions on just general WhatsApp chat. But I want to start just by kind of reminding you of the habit stuff that we've gone through. So I've mentioned this book already. It's definite. I think it's a really good book, and it's a definite recommendation. I'll give you a couple of other recommendations as well. One of the things that changed with me when I got into fitness is looking at books around mindset and things like that, and they've actually made a big difference. I can't say I'm perfect with practicing all the stuff that I read, but it is something that I do try and work on. Okay. Like I say, habits with this one, it's a big one, and just focusing on habits. So some of the stuff that I've already mentioned, things like the 4 laws of habit change. Okay. So if you want to build a good habit, then you need to think about the cue, the craving, the thing that it makes you want to feel, the response that you want from it, and then the reward from it as well. So one of the examples I gave you were just kind of thinking about, when you wake up in the morning, that's the cue, waking up. The craving is you want to feel awake and alert. The response, you drink some coffee or drink a cup of tea, and then the reward from that is that we feel more awake. And then what we do is we associate drinking coffee with waking up feeling awake. And so that starts to become a habit. You also get less positive habits. So things like eating biscuits whenever you have a cup of tea. So, you make your brew at home, you spot the biscuit tin next to it, you want a biscuit. So the response is that you have that biscuit and the pleasure that you get from that. Okay, so biscuits are designed to be hyperpalatable. These foods are designed to taste good and feel good, mouthfeel, and there's a science behind it. And the reward from that is that you enjoy the biscuit, and then you associate having a biscuit with a cup of tea. With bad habits, we can break them by looking at the inverse of that. All right. So with the cue, what we're looking for is making it invisible. So instead of having a visible cue, we make it invisible, remove the biscuit tin. And that makes it harder to see. We need to make it unattractive. We need to think about, if we eat these biscuits, what is going to happen? We need to understand the ramifications of that. We need to make it difficult. Don't just hide the biscuits. Either don't buy them in or put them completely out of sight so that you don't see them. Make it hard to get to. And then try and make it unsatisfying. Yeah. So that's something to bear in mind, all right, with these habits. So if, for example, and I was talking to somebody today as an example, if you want to get into fitness or you want to become fitter and go to the gym, you want going to the gym to become a habit, we need to have that cue. So it could be, I had a client a couple of years ago who on the way home from work, he walked past the gym. So the cue for him was just seeing the gym as he walked past it. All right. The response would then be to go into the gym. So we went into the gym, and initially I just told him to turn up and go in, and literally he'd be walking home, he'd go into the gym, he'd walk for an extra 5-10 minutes on the treadmill, go out, go home. And we just started to build up from that. And really all he was doing was instead of making that walk home a 15-minute walk, we turned it into a 25-minute walk, because he'd walk on the treadmill for 10 minutes. And just by automatically getting him into the gym, we'd then started saying, okay, instead of just doing the treadmill for 10 minutes, we'd do a workout as well. So we might warm up on the treadmill for 5-10 minutes. We'd then do a couple of exercises, and then he'd go home, and we gradually built on it. And you can do things like that, so you can come home. The cue would be to see the workout gear laid out on the bed. And then you go from there. The response would then be to do a workout. And the reward from that was the sense of achievement, and you can start to build up from there. Okay. So that's some of the stuff that you can look at with the habits, and all of that sort of stuff is in there. Right. Questions. The first one, So one of you mentioned, and I'm just going to try and find the message. There we go. So one of you was talking about finding that balance between what you're trying to achieve in the social life. Okay. And this ties into the flexible mindset stuff that I went through last week. If you come across a week where you're going to be eating out, or a week where you're away, and the stuff that you're doing at the moment, and so tracking calories, trying to get your workouts in, and all that sort of stuff, there will be occasions when that becomes hard. And that's it's obvious that is going to happen. There are always going to be periods of the year where that becomes hard. And the way to deal with that is to understand that that's okay. That is perfectly fine. 1 week in the grand scheme of things is not going to make a massive difference. Think about this sort of 80-20 rule. 80% of the time, if you are on track 80% of the time, that other 20% is not going to make a huge difference. And if you look across a whole year, 52 weeks of the year, 80% of that is 40 to 41 weeks. That means that there are 10 or 11 weeks of the year where you could be off track. Now, I'm not suggesting that you have 10 weeks every year where you just go completely off track. Okay. When I say off track, I mean it's less than perfect. That's fine. The trick is to understand that and then not let those periods of time become longer. All right. And again, one of the rules of habit forming is never miss twice. That's the kind of line. So, if you have one day where you're off track in terms of your eating, just get straight back on track the next day. All right, as best you can. If you have 1 week where you are off track, then the next week you make sure that you are on track. If you miss a workout, you don't miss the next one. If you miss a walk one day, you don't miss the next one. And the thinking behind that is building a chain of success. When I first initially lost my weight, I tracked my calories on MyFitnessPal for around about 500 days straight. 500 days on the trots, tracking all the calories, recording the weight, recording my workout. And it wasn't an obsession as such, but it was something that I wanted to make sure that, and I kind of learned that even if I had a bad day, as long as I tracked the calories, that was all right. Even if I ate over my calories, it didn't matter. All I wanted to do was just make sure that I tracked what I ate, so I was aware of it. And I kind of weighed myself. I did the workouts, and I tried to keep that chain going. The hard bit was when I'd done 500 days and then I missed a day, and that was tough. But I also then by that stage, I'd also started to realize that actually 1 day is not going to make a difference. So when I missed that day, I sat myself down and I thought, do you know what? Actually, I've done 500 days. That 1 day isn't going to make much difference. All I have to then do is try and build that chain up again. So I started from scratch and I built the chain up. And that's how I do it now. I may well track for a month, and then I might not track, and then I'll track for a month, and then I might not track. And you don't need to track all the time. Okay. That was just an example for me. But, if you are working out and you've done weeks on end where you've hit 3 workouts a week, and then 1 week you have a break, that's perfectly fine. You've had a good run, that's perfectly fine. You can then start the next chain. All right. So go for it again. So it's kind of understanding that having a week off is fine. It's not going to make much difference. So, the comment here was, next week I'm away, I'm eating out pretty much every single day, booked 2 of the restaurants. So you can kind of control some of it, which is great. And the rest is out of my control, and it's really high calorie stuff. But what do I do about it? And actually, don't do anything. You've already kind of covered yourself. And I said this to the person, you've covered yourself already. So you've already looked ahead. You've already thought about the sort of things that you want to eat. You've already planned ahead. And that's a big step. That's a massive step. You planned ahead, so you have an idea. You are still in control. those other days, those other 2 or 3 meals aren't going to make much difference. And if you understand that, then that's fine. And it's this flexible mindset, understanding that those days where you're off track, it's not going to make huge amounts of difference. All right. And then in terms of the body changes, so they then go on to say, I know how much my body changes after one meal, and I don't want 7 days of that. If you know how much your body changes after one meal, then you will also know how quickly it changes back. So 7 days of that is not going to be massive in the grand scheme of things, as long as you get back on track. All right. So if you ever have those periods of time where and we all have, I've had a month of it where, I've had birthdays, we've been to weddings, there's things, days out, there's my birthday. And, I've had 4 or 5 weekends on the trot where things haven't been easy, but that's fine. This happens, and you accept it. And then all you've got to do, like I say, never miss twice. So if you have a day off, you get back on track the next day and make sure the next day is normal. It's a good day. Okay. So I hope that helps with that. Right. Next question. Supplements. Now, I was planning on doing this for a week of supplements, but do you know what? I'm going to go through this now. I'm going to deal with this now. And we'll go through. So the question is, are there any supplements? And let me just bring the actual question up. So are there any daily supplements that are recommended? There are so many supplements out there. And the problem is that a lot of them have no solid evidence. In fact, most of them have no solid evidence of providing any benefits. So, there's things like multivitamins, there's things like antioxidants, you've got glucosamine, all of these sorts of things, that they're sold to you by the supplement industry, the diet industry, with studies and research, supposed research to back up the efficacy, their effectiveness. But what you need to understand is that these people, when they're selling you stuff, they're only ever going to pick research that supports their claims. All right. Most of that research is going to be funded by the companies that are making these things. And if you start to understand that, and it's a really, really good skill, actually, to kind of start to look at it critically. So if they publish a study that says, look, this supplement is going to do this, then look at where that study comes from. And is it one study or is it several? Because if they're just giving you one study, and then if you look at it and it actually, all these studies have to declare conflicts of interest. And if they say, actually, it was sponsored by a company that could be producing these supplements, then you have to question the kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? You have to question the reasoning behind it. All right. So the bottom line is this: most supplements are pointless. There are lots and lots of supplements out there, but most of them are pointless. Things like BCAAs. In terms of the fitness industry, there's lots of stuff out there to say, oh, BCAAs, you should be having BCAAs, or you should be having pre-workouts, or taking things like L-carnitine, or all sorts of stuff. Most of them have no solidly proven benefits. All right. However, there are supplements that do have benefits. So I've got 5 of them. Okay, 5 supplements that, and 3 of them are definite supplements that you could include daily within your diet. But 5 supplements that are things that could be beneficial. All right. So number 1, whey protein. If you cannot get enough protein within your diet, then whey protein is a good daily supplement. It's not expensive either. Okay, so you can buy places, and you don't need to go for like really expensive stuff. You don't want stuff that is labeled as diet protein. Okay, diet protein is actually intended as a meal replacement drink. It's got a lot of extra stuff in there. So they actually add carbohydrates, they add fats, they add some vitamins and minerals, which I've already sort of pointed out to you that a lot of these things are not necessary if you have a good balanced diet. And per serving, they've got less protein for the calories. All right. So per serving, they will be roughly the same number of calories as a normal protein shake, but they will have less protein in there. So just go for a standard whey protein or a whey protein isolate. Okay. The difference is whey protein isolate is literally just the protein and nothing else. Normal whey protein has a little bit of kind of sugars in there, but it's got a little bit more in there. The difference between the two is kind of really down to taste. Whey protein isolate is more expensive, and when you make it up, it's a slightly more watery drink. Whereas the whey protein stuff, if you get the normal whey protein, then it becomes a creamy drink. If you want clear stuff, you can get clear protein powder. So My Protein does a clear whey protein that you can try as well. It's a little bit more expensive, but if you're not fond of the creamy proteins, then you can go for the clear stuff, and it tastes like having a cordial. Okay, you put it in water, shake it up, it's just like having a juice. So whey protein is one good supplement. The next one that is beneficial, vitamin D, particularly in this country. Vitamin D we produce through our skin when it's in direct contact with sunlight. All right. Now, obviously, we don't get as much direct sunlight contact as we used to, as we're now sort of based in offices. So actually, as a society, as a population, this country, we are probably slightly deficient in vitamin D. So vitamin D supplements are something that could be beneficial for most people. What you want to do is look for vitamin D3. Okay. So when you're looking for a vitamin D supplement, you look for vitamin D3. That is the most effective. And in terms of doses, it's recommended that what we call between 800 to 1,000 IUs, international units, is kind of the recommended dose, but anything up to 4,000 is considered safe. So my recommendation, based on the research and the stuff that I know, is aiming for somewhere between 1,000 to 2,000 IUs. And most tablets come in that sort of a quantity. So somewhere between 1,000 to 2,000. You take it daily. You take it with food. So vitamin D is a fat soluble vitamin. And what you normally get, the best ones are the gel capsules that have some fats in there, so that when you take the vitamin D, it allows it to be absorbed a bit more easily. Otherwise, you can get your normal capsules, but take it with food, and food that has some fat within it. All right. So things like milk and stuff like that. Okay. So vitamin D3 is beneficial. You can get it from food, but it's hard. There are only certain foods that, oily fish, fortified dairy foods. So sometimes eggs are fortified with vitamin D. Eggs do contain some vitamin D as well, but they're sometimes fortified with that. There are other foods like mushrooms, particularly chestnut mushrooms. They can be fortified with vitamin D. So chestnut mushrooms, actually, when they're exposed to ultraviolet light, they produce vitamin D within them. So when you go and buy them, some of them sort of say enriched with vitamin D or high in vitamin D. So again, you can take those foods, but as ever, those foods are best taken with things that contain fat. Okay, so a little bit of fat as well, just to allow for the absorption. Right, I've got my notes here. So other ones. The next one is creatine. Creatine monohydrate specifically. Creatine is actually a substance that we produce naturally. It's particularly beneficial for those people who are working out, who are training, but there are benefits outside of that. You don't need huge amounts. Okay, you can buy it. It's very cheap, dirt cheap. All you're looking for is micronized creatine monohydrate. It's a powder. You can get it in tablet form, but the powder form's better. And you need just somewhere between 2 and 5 grams, depending on your body size. The recommended dose is 0.03 grams per kilogram. So for example, if you are, just for easy numbers, so for somebody who weighs 100 kilos, then you're looking at 3 grams per day as a maintenance dose. And literally, you just a little scoop, 3 grams. Most of them come in scoops of 5 grams, so not a full scoop, say half a scoop into water. You can take it with water, you can take it with fruit juice. I take mine with a protein powder. So when I actually have a protein shake, I'll put protein powder in and the creatine, whiz it up, drink it. Or you can actually put it in. So another way I take protein powder is with a yogurt, put the protein powder and the creatine, mix it up and in. Creatine is one of those things that you don't get the benefits immediately. It's something that builds up, and you need to take it regularly. So ideally daily. If you miss a day, don't panic. The effects don't drop off. It takes time for the effects to build up. It takes time for them to drop off. But that is something else that is beneficial. Other benefits there are benefits to brain health. There are benefits, cognitive health benefits. There are benefits to just your muscle recovery, muscle building, stamina, endurance. So there's lots of things there. If you want any information on it, I recommend checking out a podcast called Not Another Nutrition Podcast. It's by a guy called Martin McDonald, and episodes 30 to 37 covers loads of information on that. So if you've got Spotify or Apple, have a listen to those podcasts. They are, some of them is a little bit sciencey, but it's fairly accessible. He doesn't go into huge amounts of detail, and he's fairly blunt. Not everybody likes him. He can come across as arrogant, but he's very good for the basic information. And actually, there's loads of stuff on his podcast that are useful. So if you like podcasts, check him out. So creatine is a good one. Right, other ones, the last two. Omega-3 and 6 fats. All right. So within our diets, these are what we call essential fats, and quite often we don't get enough of them. So omega-3 and 6 essential fats, they come from things like plant oils, nuts, oily fish. So things like tuna, salmon, mackerel, we get them from those foods, and we don't eat as much fish as we used to. People in the Mediterranean eat a lot of those sorts of foods, and the benefits of the omega-3 and 6 oils, the omega oils is massive. It's brilliant for heart health. It's massive for reducing your stroke. It's massive for reducing your bad cholesterol levels and increasing good cholesterol levels. So the benefits of those are huge. And people with high levels of omega-3 intake are associated with a much lower risk of heart disease and stroke. So an omega-3 fish oil supplement daily is something that can be beneficial. Just avoid the fish liver oils. Fish liver oils tend to be high in vitamin A, and vitamin A, if you have it in high levels, is actually linked to increased risks. And I say linked, so it's not necessarily proven, but it's linked to increased risks of certain forms of cancer, particularly in men, and then hip fractures and hip injuries. Okay, so I would avoid the very high levels, and I'll go into a little bit more detail on that in a second, because it ties in with multivitamins. So last one, again, is calcium. So if you are a vegetarian or vegan, or if you don't have too much dairy food within your diet, you can be slightly low within your calcium intake. You can check how much calcium you take by using things like MyFitnessPal. You can check the calcium intake on that. There are some leafy green vegetables, so things like spinach can be high in calcium, watercress as well. So there are leafy greens in there that have calcium, but if you don't take enough calcium, that is linked to things like osteoporosis, brittle bone disease, and can affect also immune system health. So sometimes a calcium supplement can be beneficial. So calcium citrate or calcium carbonate, okay, which is effectively chalk. So yeah, have a look. You can though increase your calcium intake in your diet. So it's something that you can increase. So dairy products, things like yogurts, milk, cheeses, those sorts of things will be high in calcium. So if you've got those in your diet already, the chances are you're okay. But if not, then you might need a supplement. So those are the five, really. First one's whey protein, vitamin D, and creatine. Those are three that I take. I take those daily. Certainly the creatine and the vitamin D I take daily. Whey protein, if I am slightly low in my protein intake, I will have a protein shake. And I use them as a snack as well because they can be filling. Protein, remember, is satiating, satisfies your hunger. So it reduces the chance of snacking. Yeah, so those are the three: whey protein, creatine, vitamin D. And then other things that may be beneficial. So if you don't have enough fish in your diet, so if you're not eating fish once or twice a week, or you're not getting your vegetable oils in, things like that. Avocados are rich in vitamin C, in omega-6, and your fishes are rich in omega-3. So if you're not getting enough of those in, a fish oil supplement may well be beneficial as well. And then finally, calcium. But just as an aside, so other things you have to be aware of. So if you take a multivitamin, it is worth being aware that you can take too much. And I don't take a multivitamin tablet. You know, if I wanted to take things like vitamin C, get a little bit more vitamin C in me. So, you know, if I get a cold, then I do sometimes increase the vitamin C intake. I will get a vitamin C tablet, literally just one of those ones that you drop in water, and all it has in it is vitamin C. That's it. Okay. Vitamin C you can't overdose on. If you consume more than your body needs, it literally gets rid of it. You excrete it. You just get rid of it. Okay. You can't overconsume it. However, there are some of the vitamins that you can overconsume. So things like vitamin A, you can overconsume, and some of them can become toxic if you have too many of them. So if you have a lot of multivitamins, if you're taking a multivitamin and some fish liver oils, for example, then you could be getting too much vitamin A. You know, if you're taking vitamin E supplements and a multivitamin, you can be taking too much vitamin E. And some of them are toxic. Long term, they have toxicity if you take too much. So you do have to be aware of that. So yeah. And then things like I say, stuff like glucosamine, there's loads of them. There is no solid, proven, unequivocal evidence that they have any long-term beneficial effects. They are literally, if you are taking stuff like that, you're quite literally chucking money down the drain. Okay, so good diet will give you enough of the vitamins and minerals that you need. You know, if you are eating 5 to 8 portions of vegetables a day, fruit and vegetables a day, you will be getting enough of the micronutrients you need. You don't need huge amounts. They're called micronutrients because we need micro amounts, very small trace amounts. All right. So if you've got a good, varied, balanced diet, you will be getting everything you need. Like I say, the only ones that could possibly be beneficial are things like whey protein. All right, that's the key one. Just because a high protein diet is beneficial long term. And again, just the last little bit, this is a little bit of an aside and a bit interesting. There has been a study published recently. It was actually done and finished a couple of years ago, 2019, I think it was finished, but it's taken a while for the results to come through, and it's been published, and it's tied in with metabolic rate. So, and I'm sorry to say this, you cannot use metabolic rate dropping with age as a reason for putting weight on. The study showed, and they basically took people from age 8 days up to 95, and they based it across thousands and thousands and thousands of people in this study. And they measured the metabolic rate of these people across this whole age range from 8 to 95. They did it in men and women, and they looked at all sorts of different stages of life, different conditions, all of these sorts of things. Now, what they found was this really interesting. So up to the age of 1, your metabolic rate rises very, very rapidly up to the age of 1. And at 1 to 2 years old, your metabolic rate is peak. Your body is highly active in terms of metabolism. That then drops down to the age of about 20, and it drops quite rapidly. So you get this big peak and then down to 20. Between 20 and 60, it stays the same. Your metabolic rate does not change between the ages of 20 and 60. Okay. So, and that was the same for men and women. There was no difference between men and women. There was very, very little, no discernible changes in metabolic rate for things like going through the menopause. There were some conditions that would affect it. So things like metabolic disorders, like thyroid disorders. There were some things that can drop it, but not as much as people think. Okay. And actually, if the condition is treated and managed, then there was no difference at all. There were some conditions like polycystic ovary syndrome that could cause a slight drop, again, in the metabolic rate, but again, not as big as people thought on average. Okay. So your metabolic rate from the age of 20 up to 60 does not change. From 60 onwards, it drops, but it only drops by 0.7% per year, which is nothing. It's tiny. And for the average person, that equates to every year your metabolic rate dropping by 10 calories. So your daily baseline metabolic rate dropping by 10 calories, all right, which is not massive. When they did further investigation, actually what they found was it wasn't the body's metabolism that was changing. It was two things. Number one was muscle mass, lean muscle mass. There was a decline in lean muscle mass. And number two, there was a decline in activity. So it actually wasn't the body. Your body, the metabolism doesn't really change, because what you've got to understand is that the metabolism in your body is how your body reacts, all the reactions that are going on, how it deals with food, how it processes food, how the processes go on within your cells. That's what metabolism is. And that doesn't change throughout your life. There was they looked at, there's parts of the cell called the mitochondria, and they were looking at the rate of metabolic change within the mitochondria. And actually there was very, very, very little difference, if any at all. And what actually happened with people's metabolic rates dropping was down to a loss of lean muscle mass and a loss of activity level. And that you can explain that through lifestyle changes as you get older, okay? But also you can explain that because as you become older, you automatically start to become less active. And what they found was that by doing things like strength training, you maintained your lean muscle mass and your metabolic rate stayed the same beyond 60. If you kept being active and walking, your metabolic rate stayed the same beyond 60. Okay. So last little bit there, just as an interesting one, your metabolic rate does not change from 20 onwards up until the age of 60. And then you can mitigate any changes by remaining active, staying active, keeping your steps up. And I'm not saying just working out all the time, but just by simply keeping your steps up. What they noticed was that the average number of steps a person was doing as they got older dropped. And that accounted for most of the drop in the metabolic rate as you got older. And then the rest of it was down to something called sarcopenia, which is just muscle loss. And that is down to, again, lack of activity. Okay. So takeaway from this is that you can still achieve your goals. Your metabolic rate isn't going to play a massive role in that. All right. There are other compounding factors that can make it harder for weight loss, but it doesn't make it impossible. It can make it a little bit harder, but one of the things that you need to take away from this is that actually it doesn't make it impossible. All it means is that you need to not work harder, but you need to understand the processes behind it and figure out what's going to work for you. All right. But the takeaway is that your metabolic rate doesn't make it harder for you to lose weight as you get older. There are other factors, things like, job, looking after kids, responsibilities, and it's then managing those around your health and fitness. All right. This one was going on a little bit longer than I anticipated. So listen to this, stick it on. I'm going to put this up to YouTube, stick it on YouTube. stick it on your headphones while you're going for a walk, have a listen to it, and hopefully that's useful. But I will be back again next week. Bye for now.